Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Bree Buonomo. Hi if you're new here, or hey if you've been here before. And today I'm going to do my February wrap up. This is the video where I talk about all the books I read, the things I wrote, and some personal life tidbits in case you are interested in what I do when I'm not sharing on YouTube. So as always, I don't want to ramble too much. February was another interesting month of 2025. So let's just start with the books I read. So surprisingly, I completed 5 books in the month of February. And that's surprising because I had quite a few thick books. Like I think there were 3 books that were over 500 pages, which is a lot for me. But the first book that I actually completed, I had started in January, and if you watch my January wrap-up, I had started this book for the Books in La La Buzzword-a-thon, and I pretty much finished it like the next, I think it was like February 1st or 2nd, but I was counting it because I had almost, I was so close to being done on the last day of January, and I'm like, I also decided to start the book, I think it was on January 22nd. So I finished The Lies We Conjure by Sarah Henning. And honestly, this month has been a pretty solid score all through. I'm not going to lie, you're going to see a pattern here, but I rated it a 4-star. It might be more like a 3.75 technically. I was really interested in it. I thought it was a really fun book. It was very fast-paced at the very least, but it didn't quite like wow me. It wasn't enough for me to be like 5-star, hands down my new favorite, but I really did enjoy it, so I rated it a 4. I really liked the world building. I liked the subtle magic touches where it wasn't anything like this grand crazy thing, like there was no chosen ones or whatever. It really was a self-contained story where you basically had this plot of these 2 girls are paid by this woman to act as her granddaughters who have not been seen in over a decade and have been living abroad. But the woman basically gives them a bunch of lies and says like, I'm gonna pay you if you impersonate my granddaughters. Here's all the information you need to know about yourselves and about the people that are gonna be at this dinner party. But when the girls arrive, you know, they are just 2 mundane human people. Once one of the elders in the household, or the dynamic that we have here, dies in front of them and their body releases a ghostly message to them. They quickly find out that they are amongst witches, and this is the coven meeting that people have been avoiding for some time. So it's very interesting about like who's connected to who's lying about what. Are their own lies going to be found out? And all in all, like I said, it was a pretty good time. I do think another reason I'm going to give it a 4 is that near, like not quite the full end, but as we were like bridging from like the 2nd act to the 3rd act, I did find myself just zoning out a little bit. So I don't know if it felt maybe a little too long or dragged out, or I just started to lose my interest because of like all the plot threads going on. But I lulled a little bit there and then pulled it back for the ending. But yeah, overall, it was a solid book. And this was the first by Sarah Henning that I read. So I would very much consider picking up another book by her. Then I read Witchcraft for Wayward Girls by Grady Hendrix. This is also the first time I'm reading a Grady Hendrix book, and I figured this would be a great place to start because I usually love witches. And I also gave this a 4-star. I recently watched Books in La La. I basically watched Books in La La for everything because I really like her recommendations. But they did a live show on this, and she described it very well, and I absolutely agree with this this description that this book is a historical fiction cake with a witchy icing and some horror sprinkles. That is the perfect description for it. I was going into this book expecting way more horror, and I didn't get it. And I was okay with that, to be honest. I still really enjoyed this book. I think the commentary on the 1970s culture, especially for young women and young unwed pregnant women, it's very important. And it's also to remember that like these things weren't that long ago. Like the 1970s is like my parents' age. Like that's when they were born. So this stuff was happening like not long ago. And yeah, I just think it was well done. I do think it's sometimes similar to the Lies We Conjured. There were some lulls and I felt like things were a little bit too dragged out. And some of the characters I didn't feel as connected to, or I would be interested in them, but they didn't really go anywhere. But overall, I did enjoy it, and I appreciated for the commentary on women's bodies and the way that pregnancy and adoption were treated back then. And I definitely would recommend it to certain people. It's not, like I said, it's not really like a horror heavy book. So if that's not something you're interested in, if you don't want to read horror, but you also maybe like historical fiction with some fantasy elements, then I think this would be great for you. Next, I read and finished Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. So I'm not gonna lie, I wanted to do a whole vlog on this book. I really wanted to. I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do that, and we're gonna talk about this. And then I'm not kidding you, like I started this book in one of my reading vlogs, and I think I got maybe to chapter like maybe 7 in it or around that time, and then I just completely forgot to vlog. But I also was going through some difficulties in February, so by the time I was like, oh, I forgot to do this, I didn't have the energy to do it anymore. But I did really enjoy this. This was also a 4-star for me. This was just a 4-star month, which isn't bad. That means I am refining my taste, because even when I don't find them perfect, I'm still really much enjoying this. And like the masses, I really understand the appeal. This is a world where there is a kind of like a chosen one who went bad, and that Dark Lord is now ruling over the world and just being a really terrible person, like making certain people and certain individuals essentially slaves or indentured servants, where the wealthy and the poor are like extremely disparaged. And there's these people called Mistborns or Mistings, and they are the ones with magic. So Mistings have the ability to like alter or command a certain metal, whereas Mistborn can command all the metals that are known to man. And there are 10 metals when we start this book, and we get to learn like all of these things pretty quickly. What I will say is it is pretty like heavy world building right up front, even though the first couple chapters are super disorienting. Like he just throws you into this world. Like it's like Brandon goes, "Oop, there you go. Drop it in," and you're like, wow, I don't know what's going on. And it took me quite a few chapters to actually start to understand what all these words meant, because there was just no context. And I didn't really like that myself. That's not my favorite type of like I appreciate that you trust me as a reader that I'm going to figure it out, but I like a little bit, like just a little bit. Like I was okay not knowing what a ska was at first, but then there was like other things where I'm like, what is happening here? So that was super frustrating at first, but then it eased up. But the beginning was slow. And then once we met Elend and I fell in love, I was hooked. I was very much intrigued with the court politics, and who doesn't love a good ball? I'm just a sucker for that, okay? I literally was like, oh, here's the appeal. I'm enjoying it now. So I guess my old school YA heart of what I grew up with still has that love. But I started to enjoy the book very much, and overall it was a really good time. I am going to continue in the series, and if you guys are interested, if you want to join our book club, I run a book club with Autumn Ashley, and we are reading this trilogy. So we just finished Mistborn, and if you think you can read Mistborn and the Well of Ascension by the end of April, then come join us. You have 2 months, so you could read a book in a month maybe, and we could talk about both books. And that's my thoughts on Mistborn. Then I completed an audiobook that I got from the library. I had been like putting it on hold and then pushing it off, putting it on hold, pushing it off. And I was like, okay, we're just gonna read it because it's quick. But it is something that I read as kind of like a triple dip. One, I read it as a counselor because I feel like it can help my clients. I always like to recommend certain clients like a good book to read to maybe help ground them in the situation that they're describing. So I was like, okay, I like to have these on hand to give out to people to be like, here, read this and we could talk about it. 2, I was like, well, maybe it'll be something beneficial for me as well in my own life. And 3, what I really decided that this would help with is potentially for my main character in my vampire novel, because my main character has a complicated relationship with her mother, and I thought maybe I could use some of this information in their dynamic. And that book is The Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents How to Heal from Distant, Rejecting, or Self-Involved Parents by Lindsay C. Gibson, who is a psychologist. So I would recommend this book. I think it was very good for what it was. It offers resources, it offers worksheets, and it is meant to be like a workbook. So you can listen to it like on audio, but I do think this is one that would be beneficial if you had the physical book so you can like work through it or make copies. But overall, it was very pleasant. I think it's digestible. I think the scenarios used are very relevant and to people they would understand it. And so yeah, as a counseling tool, absolutely would recommend. I've already recommended it to 3 of my clients. It was great. As a personal tool, I knew all this information already, so I didn't learn anything new for myself, but I do appreciate that I read it so I can give it out to other people who might be interested. And as a writing tool, I think I didn't get enough out of it for my book, which is fine. I wanted, I think, more of like how people, like more to know about like how the children act. And that's actually not the book's about, although she has other spin-offs, so it might in a different book. But I kind of wanted to like think about like more about like, okay, if I'm a child with an emotionally immature parent, like what are things that I have to be aware of for myself? Instead, it really does focus on the parents and like how like their actions come across and things to look for and then what you should do to act on it. Not necessarily how like they may impact me and how I may then act because of it. So yeah, I was hoping maybe more for that dynamic in order to apply it to my novel. But like I said, overall, it was a good book. And then lastly, I finished this behemoth in February, and that's Babel, An Arcane History by R.F. Kuang. I just absolutely love this edition too. Like, this is so stunning. I'm so happy I have it. But yeah, beautiful. So anyway, I read this book. This is, as it says, an arcane history. So this takes place in Oxford, I believe in the 1800s, but I could be wrong. Yeah, 1836. And you are following these students who are kind of like plucked from different areas of the world in order to be translators, because Oxford basically has all this knowledge and they are using it for arcane magic. There are these silver bars that like when used and like said with the right incantation and intention, it can basically be used as magic and you can do a lot with it, but you need the appropriate pronunciation and you need to actually know what the words mean, which is why they have all these translators come to Babel. And these people are not really well respected. Like some people kind of respect them, be like, oh, you're Oxford students. And other people just still treat them like trash because these are like Chinese immigrants and African immigrants. And one is from France and one is from America. And they're just not really respected. Like they're tolerated. And oftentimes they're just cast aside once they're done with their purpose. So even though they have Oxford prestige, like you've graduated from Oxford, it doesn't matter. And it follows a group of 4 people who are thrown into this society, and it's like their cohort. But like they start to unravel like what's actually going on, and there's a lot of political commentary on it. And it was very well written. Still, I would give this a 4. I really enjoyed it, but it really took me quite a bit to get into the book and like really want to pick it up and keep going. I actually buddy read this with Mars, or they're also known as Somber Honey, and I will leave their YouTube down below. But buddy read this and we were kind of chatting. Mars like flew through it, so they were done much earlier than I was, but I was like taking my time and I would like give my thoughts and then go back and read their thoughts, and it was a really good experience, and we both kind of felt exactly the same. It was slow in the beginning and I could almost understand why that was the case, and then it picked up speed, and then the ending kind of like fizzled out, but I also think that was intentionally done. So while I know these things I think were extremely pointed in why they were done the way they were done, as a story and or as like a textbook, because this is kind of like an arcane history, it's kind of meant to be like an account of what was going on. I didn't feel like it fully met my satisfaction level, which is why I can't give it a 5. But I do think I can understand and appreciate why it was done this certain way, why this commentary was stated, why certain POVs would come in at certain times. I get it. And like I said, it was really well done. Let me know what your thoughts were if you read any of these books. Those were the 5 that I finished in the month of February. And now we're gonna move on to some writing. And actually, I have very little writing news. I pretty much shared a lot of my writing stuff in recent videos. So if you haven't, please go check out my 2 latest videos where I chat about writing. I did a live editing where I literally showed you my screen and talked about my editing process, like pretty much what goes on in my head with Project Vampire. And then I also talked about feedback I received on a short story I wrote. And the updates really are that I received that feedback and I got rejected from the contest that I submitted to back in November. It's fine. I was kind of preparing for rejection just because that's how most things go when you're short story submitting. But yeah, I wasn't really fully, I think I was holding out hope because I loved the story so much. So when I got the feedback, it just wasn't as useful as I was expecting it. And I have a whole video talking about that. I did submit a short story to another place. I submitted to Abyss and Apex, and I actually edited the story a little bit more. So they did recommend that if you have something that's really close to 1,000 words, to get it to 1,000 words or under for flash fiction. And mine was, I think, 1,100 words. So I was able to trim that bad boy down, and I submitted my sci-fi short story about depression. So we'll see if it gets somewhere. But yeah, I almost forgot that I did it because it was like just a last minute thing. And I was like, okay, yeah, we're going to do it. It's open. I've been waiting for it because I missed last open window. So I submitted to that. So fingers crossed. Maybe that story will find its home because I love that story so much. And then the biggest update is that in February, I almost got to finish Vampire Draft 2. I could have, and let that be known. I'm not actually talking out of my ass. I really could have finished it, but on March 2nd, I was hosting a tea party for my family, and I needed to just do so much work. I had to go to the grocery store, I had to bake things and make things, and I had to clean my house, and I just really wanted like to be kind of fresh, like get in the spring vibes, spring clean a little bit, and bring in a lot of good intentions in my house. Just so you know, like I could have done it, but I did prioritize what I needed to get done first, and that meant that the last 2 chapters of Vampire were unedited in February, but I did so much work in the end. I don't know how I flew through that book because I was really thinking that it wasn't going to happen, and then it did. So yeah, that means March we are going to be finishing my book and hopefully diving right into draft 3 so I can get it out to readers maybe by the end of March or beginning of April. So yeah, if you guys are interested, stick around. I will definitely be needing some beta readers in the near future. And that's all my writing updates. Pretty short and sweet, I think. And lastly, my personal life, which is always on fire. Let's be real. I don't know what a calm life is at this point. I just know that I keep on surviving. So we had some ups and downs again, but I think overall it was like a good month. We started off good. We had a bit of a dip there because life was crazy, and then it ended on a better note. But I will say there's a lot of unknown factors in my life right now, and at any moment, like, things can hit the fan. So I'm just taking it day by day. But in between all that chaos was a lot of good things. I went to a dinner with my family because I have a lot of birthdays that we celebrate in the month, and that was actually really nice. I enjoyed that. We watched The Gorge, and I don't know if you guys are familiar, but basically it stars Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy, and they are in these 2 towers that are overlooking this gorge, and nobody really knows what's down there, but they're supposed to guard it and basically be like, if anything comes up out of it, shoot it down. And they, for the first like few days, because they're supposed to be there for a year, a few weeks, like nothing really happens, and then stuff happens. So it was an interesting movie. Similarly to the Grady Hendrix book, I thought there was going to be more horror elements, but it was more like thriller with love in it instead, and it was fun. As far as TV goes, we have been watching Mythic Quest, which I don't know if anybody else watches Mythic Quest, but I feel like it's just not hitting the same as it used to. I'm just a little bit bored with this season, even though stuff is like going on. It's just kind of not not holding my attention, and that makes me sad because I loved the first 2 seasons so much. What is holding my attention is Severance. So if anybody is watching Severance, let me know your thoughts down below. This show, we watched the first season, not the year it came out, but the year after. And then that's when we learned the writer's strike had delayed it. So like we have been waiting for Severance to return for so long. And initially, like the first 2 episodes, I was like, oh, what is happening? This is very strange. And obviously that was done on purpose, but now we're getting into it and I'm like, oh my God, what is happening? This show is going to give me heart palpitations. And I feel like we're not going to have any major answers yet. I hope we at least get one this season, because the first season, I feel like we were left with a lot of like open-ended questions. I hope we get at least one answer, and I just need to know the how. And if you're watching the show, I feel like hopefully you understand how I'm talking about. But if you haven't watched it, you need to. It's just brilliant. It is a very fascinating, very interesting sci-fi show on Apple TV, and I love it. Like, goals to write something like that one day. And otherwise, we pretty much just had like, you know, pretty normal stuff. Like we did a Valentine's Day dinner on the 13th instead of the 14th. Hi. And I know like I did small things here and there, but I have been trying to save money, so I have not been going out very much. But as always, like, you know, I host my book club, I host my writing club, and I dabble here and there with other writing stuff. So that's been my month. I think I'm boring right now. I don't have a lot to report on, but yeah, that's me. Okay, so on that note, let's end this so that I can stop rambling. And you guys can let me know down in the comments how your February was. Anything great that you read, any big writing wins you want to share, or just something cool that you did in the month, let me know down below. And until next time, I'll see you then. Bye.